we start with the demand factors to discuss the factors that shifted. We were looking to the factors that increased the income of the skilled workers and decreased the income of unskilled workers, and therefore, which might be reason to some extent reason to increase in inequality. Although to some extent that plays a relatively small part, at least when we look to the very bottom end, the median wage. Although when we look to the medium, I mean other levels, maybe like level of 25th percentile wage, you might see some effects. But one factor that could be effective in decreasing, and we might also expect that, I mean, this extreme skilled workers with really the skills that are really demanded more might also increase the top 10 percentile wage and top 75 percentile wage more than the median wage. So there might be also an effect of the skill differences in the top, medium, top and medium level wage and income differences. So international trade is one factor that affected the demand. As we have discussed before, international trade actually provides access to the goods of the countries which have plenty of unskilled labor. So the goods that are produced by unskilled labor, demand for those goods has fallen, while the United States have relatively more skilled labor compared with other, especially developing countries. And as a result, demand for goods that require skilled labor is expected to increase in the United States, and which was likely to decrease demand for unskilled labor. Similarly, technology change may have made the need for some unskilled labor not necessary in the production, especially in service. Same question could be asked for the service sector. Although in 1990s and 2000s, the service sector has expanded, which might have created some demand for unskilled workers in general. Although within this expanding service sector, the need per GDP produced by need for labor per output produced by service sector might have maybe decreased because technology to some extent has also affected these sectors. Like, for example, you can order using the internet. You don't need to go to cashier anymore. But to what extent these factors were effective in the service sector, this is something that should be tested. Actually, more research should be done on service sector. Basically, maybe there are some recent ones made. And supply factors, immigration to United States has actually mostly been interesting. Actually, the permission is given to relatively more skilled workers are given special permission to immigrate to the United States, and from the countries that are actually from which immigrants are taken, still skilled workers are a significant portion of those people. Although in some cases the degrees of those people are not counted, so those people, even though they have degrees, they might need to work as unskilled workers. So it is assumed by the book, at least, that the unskilled immigrants are relatively higher than the skilled immigrants, especially when they are refugees and when they are just crossing the border without taking proper documents. And even if they are skilled, because lack of proper documents may make them, I mean, they might not be able to work for skilled jobs, and they might be only able to work for unskilled jobs, which might increase the inequality. They are not counted as US citizens, so they themselves won't increase the inequality, but they might beat the wage down and decrease the wage level of the unskilled US workers. And college completion rates, by the way, have decreased in the United States. So which might have limited the supply of skilled workers. Supply of skilled workers might not be increasing as fast as the demand for those skilled workers. So these are the supply factors. You can see here actually the role demand and supply has in the well change in the relative wage of well skilled and unskilled workers. I believe so. This is the relative wage. How the relative wage changes. Assuming from when you look to the numbers, we might assume this is the well skilled over unskilled labor. So the change has been actually in favor of the skilled workers. A percentage change has been in favor of the skilled workers for 1960s, 70s, and 80s. Only in 1990s it has been in favor of the unskilled workers. And we can see here actually the demand and supply for skilled and unskilled workers relative basically. Well, demand for the skilled workers relative to unskilled workers has increased more compared with the increased basically throughout the years. Supply for the unskilled labor has also increased. I mean, if you see in 1970s, there's a drastic increase, which again decreased the wages of the skilled workers relative to unskilled workers. In 60s, there was a smaller increase. In 80s, there is a small increase, still larger than the. I mean, in both in 1970s and in early 1990s, the increase was less than the increase in 1970s. Although 90s is not complete, but the demand increased a lot more in those in that period, and as a result, this drastic increase in demand, which is actually maybe is most consistent trend, lead to increase the difference between skilled and unskilled labor wages more and increase the inequality between those two wages. So only in 1970s actually you have a decrease basically, and you can see also, especially after 1970s, which was the peak period, you have a stagnation of the college graduates. Although in beginning of 1990s there has been a kind of increase in it, or the increase in skilled labor relative to unskilled labor has relatively increased. Of course, these are relative quantities, so we should also take into account the population-wise increase. I mean, absolute number of the skilled workers might be still increasing throughout these years, throughout 80s, but absolute number of the unskilled workers might be increasing even more. And then there are some institutional factors. Minimum wage. Minimum wage has, throughout the real minimum wage, the buying power of minimum wage has fallen throughout the years throughout the 1980s and 90s in the United States, which actually was increasing the wage level of the unskilled bottom group of the unskilled workers at least. And as it falls, inequality is expected to increase. Also, we might assume collective bargaining especially benefits the unskilled workers, since the productivity differences between them is lower and they are more likely to be benefit from the collective bargaining process. As union power in the United States decreases, this might also decrease the power of the unskilled workers to bargain and increase the inequality. But even when the skilled workers also want to collectively bargain, still they have some bargaining power. So even if their wages also fall as a result of lack of unions, the damage, the harm, the loss of bargaining power of the unskilled worker will be higher, because their wealth stocks are likely to be lower, and as a result, I mean, they might experience higher decreases in the wage level or income level. So these are the factors that, according to the book, might be effective in increasing the inequality in the United States. Now we can talk a little bit on the poverty, which is also a concept which might be difficult to describe. And in 19th century, it was a visible problem, which was written a lot. But you also need certain variables that should measure poverty. There are different variables. I'm talking on the most popular one, which in this course, well, there are also other dimensions of poverty, which of course we cannot get into since this is only a part of the last lecture, part of a lecture, the poverty section. But the most popular way to measure poverty is defining an income necessary for the life standard, which get you the basic needs for a healthy life and for a healthy participation in the society. So that line requires also, for example, making a travel holiday every year, a weekly holiday, for example, being able to join to the art events at least month once in a month, being able to buy newspaper every day, having a healthy diet. So those things are defining the poverty line, and there's a minimum, and you calculate minimum cost of all of these things, and as a result, you got the poverty line. Of course, what should be inside of this basket or what should not be in that basket can be a matter of discussion, but poverty line at least is a measurement that we can define to measure poverty. Of course, in some cases, there is a distribution of extreme poverty, and you might actually define multiple of baskets, at the top of which you might get exactly out of poverty. But as you get lower in the basket, lower baskets, it's less goods in it and services in it, you got more severe poverty, basically. So there is this concept of severe poverty, which is actually an extreme form of poverty. So sometimes when you look poverty data, when you look in detail, they don't say immediately. Sometimes they actually show severe poverty, not the actual poverty line, actual poor people. And sometimes, in order to define this extreme poverty, a term which is another line is used, which is hunger line. Hunger line is basically the money you need to buy a healthy diet, and again, it can be controversial, but it is determined by dietists also, and the minimum money you need to buy that diet. And both are calculated for 4 persons. So if you are a single person, it changes. In the United States, for 4 persons, it is $17,970, around $18,000, which was less than my income in the United States. Although I was not raising family, basically. And you can see here the poverty line in the United States. I think it is adjusted to the family size in the top part, and you can see that the poverty line is basically it has been between the 12% and the 16% mostly. In 2000s, it has fallen to 12%, and then it has risen back to 16%. But general trend has been more or less constant since 1980s and between 1980s and 2010, and it is between 12% and 16% in the United States. It's a high value in my opinion, basically, because the United States is the richest country in the world, but still 15%, I mean more than 1/10 actually, 1/7 of the United States is living poor. Anyway, this is the end of the main part of this lecture.